Meet Sarah. Sarah is 29 years old, HR manager at a mid-sized tech company in Austin, Texas, $68,000 a year. She has $11,000 sitting in a savings account at her bank. She calls it her emergency fund. She's proud of it. She built it herself, $500 at a time, over 2 years. When she looks at that number, she feels safe. She feels responsible. She feels like she's doing everything right. Now meet Danielle, also 29, also Austin, also $68,000 a year. She also has money set aside for emergencies, but she keeps hers somewhere different. A high-yield savings account, yes, but that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is what she does with everything above a certain number. Sarah and Danielle went to the same university, graduated the same year, started their careers within 3 months of each other. They even follow the same personal finance accounts on Instagram. In 27 years, when both of them are 56, Sarah will have roughly $340,000 in retirement savings. Danielle will have $1.1 million. Same income, same starting point, same intention to be responsible with money. The difference wasn't discipline. It wasn't luck. It wasn't some secret investment or wild risk. It was something almost no one talks about, something hiding inside a decision that felt completely safe. Sarah's emergency fund, the one she built with such care, the one that gives her that feeling of security every time she logs into her bank account, is quietly making her poorer. Every single month. And the devastating part? She'll probably never know. Here's what's actually happening. Sarah has $11,000 in a traditional savings account at a major bank. That account pays her 0.4% interest annually. On $11,000, that's about $44 a year. Not $44 a month, $44 a year. Roughly $3.67 a month. Inflation right now is running between 3 and 4%, which means that $11,000 is losing purchasing power every single year. In real terms, Sarah's emergency fund isn't growing, it's shrinking. Slowly, quietly, invisibly, but shrinking. Now, here's where it gets more expensive. Most financial advice says to keep 3 to 6 months of expenses in your emergency fund. For Sarah, spending about $3,800 a month, that means somewhere between $11,400 and $22,800. She's right in that range. She followed the advice. She did what she was told. But nobody told her that holding too much in a low-yield account has a compounding cost. And that cost is the most invisible tax in personal finance. Let's call it the liquidity penalty. The liquidity penalty is what you pay, not in fees, not in interest charges, but in lost opportunity when you keep money in a form that feels safe but earns almost nothing. It's the ghost cost, the one that never shows up on a statement, the one that never triggers an alert on your banking app. It doesn't feel like losing money because nothing is being taken from you, but something is absolutely being taken. Time, compounding. Decades of growth on dollars that are just sitting there, anxious and idle, waiting for a disaster that statistically, for most people, never comes, or never comes at the scale they feared. Here's the math that should make your stomach drop a little. Sarah keeps $11,000 in her traditional savings account, earns 0.4%. After 27 years, that $11,000 becomes about $12,200. She gained roughly $1,200. If Sarah had kept $5,000 as her true liquid emergency buffer, enough to cover a major unexpected expense or about 6 weeks of critical bills, and invested the remaining $6,000 in a low-cost index fund averaging 7% annually, that $6,000 becomes approximately $38,000. Same 27 years. That's a $26,000 difference on a single decision made once in her 20s. But it doesn't stop there, because Sarah, like most people, doesn't just make this decision once. She makes a version of it every year. Every time she gets a raise, she adds to her savings account instead of redirecting the excess. Every time she gets a tax refund, she deposits it into the account that earns almost nothing because it feels responsible, because it feels secure. Not because the account charges you anything, but because every dollar sitting in low-yield safety is a dollar not compounding at 7%. Over 27 years of these small recurring decisions, the gap between Sarah and Danielle doesn't just persist, it accelerates.
Now let me walk you through exactly where this happens, because it's not one big mistake, it's 4 small ones, made it 4 completely normal decision points. Decision point 1. The initial setup. David and his wife Christine set up their emergency fund when they bought their first home in 2019. Their monthly expenses were $4,200, so they set aside $25,200 in a standard savings account. What nobody told David and Christine is that liquid doesn't have to mean earning nothing. A high-yield savings account at an online bank, the kind that takes 48 to 72 hours to transfer, is still liquid for any real emergency. And those accounts, right now, are paying between 4.5 and 5.25% annually. On $25,200, the difference between 0.4% and 4.9% is about $1,134 a year. Every year. That's $1,134 not in their pocket, not compounding, not building anything, just evaporating, because they set up the account at their local bank and never thought about it again. Decision point 2. The raises that never got redirected. Robert got a 4% raise in 2021, another 3% in 2022. By 2023, he was making about $11,000 more per year than when he'd first set his emergency fund target. But his expenses hadn't grown that much, maybe $1,500 more annually. His emergency fund target should have stayed roughly the same, but he didn't recalculate. He just kept saving. His emergency fund grew from 6 months of expenses to almost 14 months. It felt like progress. It felt like safety. What it actually was $22,000 in excess liquidity sitting in an account earning 0.4%, quietly costing him, in opportunity cost against a 7% market average, about $1,440 a year. Every year. For years. His wife Jennifer had a different instinct. Every time she got a raise, she'd ask one question: does this change my actual risk exposure? If the answer was no, the extra money went into her Roth IRA or her brokerage account. Her emergency fund target was a number she'd calculated deliberately, not a number that just kept growing because she kept adding to it. In 15 years, Jennifer's surplus raise investments compound to roughly $61,000 more than Robert's idle cash. Not because she made riskier decisions, because she made more precise ones. Decision point 3. The tax refund reflex. The average American tax refund is around $3,000. For most people, that refund feels like a gift, found money, and the instinct, especially for people who are already financially anxious, is to put it somewhere safe. Somewhere safe usually means the savings account. Here's the trap inside the trap. The feeling of safety is the problem. Not because saving is wrong, because the feeling itself can become a destination rather than a tool. When holding money in a low-yield account starts to feel like an accomplishment, when the account balance becomes the source of security rather than what that money could eventually do, you've crossed into a psychological pattern that quietly costs you hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. Researchers call it mental accounting. We assign different emotional values to the same dollar based on where it sits. A dollar in a savings account feels safer than a dollar in an index fund, even when the math says the opposite is true over a 20-year horizon. The savings account feels safe because you can see it, access it instantly. It never goes down in nominal terms. The index fund feels risky because it moves.
But nominal stability in a low-yield account over decades is one of the most expensive forms of financial comfort you can buy. The phrase most people say to themselves at this decision point, "I just want to know it's there." It's there, but it's slowly becoming less. Decision point 4. The insurance you already have and forgot about. Here's something almost nobody talks about when sizing an emergency fund. You probably already have a financial safety net that overlaps with what you think you need to cover. Health insurance, car insurance with rental coverage, homeowners or renters insurance, short-term disability through your employer, typically 60% of your income for up to 26 weeks. A Roth IRA, where contributions, not earnings, can be withdrawn anytime, penalty-free, for any reason. Most people calculate their emergency fund as if none of these exist. They imagine the worst case, the total catastrophe, job loss, medical emergency, car destruction, all at once, and they hold enough cash to survive it completely alone. That fear-based calculation leads to gross overallocation in low-yield cash, and that overallocation, compounded over decades, is one of the quietest wealth destroyers in the middle class. So what do you actually do? If you're in your 20s or early 30s with a stable income and no dependents, your true liquid emergency buffer is probably 1 to 3 months of essential expenses. Not total expenses, essential ones. Rent or mortgage, utilities, food, minimum debt payments. For most people in this situation, that number is somewhere between $4,000 and $9,000. Keep it in a high-yield savings account, not your bank's savings account, an online bank. Then invest everything above that number. If you're in your mid-30s to mid-40s with dependents, a mortgage, and less job flexibility, 3 months of total expenses in a high-yield account is reasonable. 4 if your industry is volatile, 5 if you're self-employed. Beyond that, you're not building security. You're building a very expensive emotional security blanket. If you're in your 50s and approaching retirement, the calculus shifts. Holding 1 to 2 years of expenses in low-risk liquid assets makes sense as you near the withdrawal phase. But even then, high-yield savings, short-term treasury funds, money market accounts, not a savings account at a big bank paying you almost nothing. The uncomfortable truth, regardless of your age, is this: the right-sized emergency fund is smaller than it feels like it should be. And that feeling, the discomfort, the anxiety of holding less cash than you think you need, is the exact feeling that most financial growth requires you to tolerate. Growth happens at the edge of your comfort zone. That's not a motivational poster, it's arithmetic. Now I want you to picture yourself at 58. You're sitting somewhere. Maybe it's your home, maybe it's somewhere you love to go. You're looking at your financial picture, your retirement account, your options. In one version of this moment, you feel a specific kind of peace, not because you're rich, but because the decisions you made quietly, persistently in your 30s and 40s, the ones that felt slightly uncomfortable, the ones where you moved money out of the account that felt safe into the one that felt uncertain, those decisions compounded into something real. You have choices. You can retire when you want to. You're not working because you have to. The math worked out, not because of anything dramatic, because of a series of small, precise decisions made when they were invisible and inconvenient. In the other version, you feel something different. You feel okay, but okay has a cost. You look at the number and do the math backward. You think about the money that sat for years in a low-yield account because it felt responsible. You don't even know exactly what it cost you. It never showed up anywhere. There was never an alert. You never saw it leave. But the difference between where you are and where you could have been, that lives somewhere quiet in the back of your mind. The $11,000 sitting in Sarah's account doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like safety. But here's the question I want to leave you with. Not as a conclusion, not as a call to action, just something to sit with. When you look at your savings account balance and feel that sense of security, is that feeling protecting your future, or is it just protecting your today?